instigated before. But there are opportunities in any crisis. New ideas come along. Africa's vast and diverse plant resources, which in combination of advanced science and knowledge can be cultivated and processed as part of its bioeconomy. This is underlined by the new report of the Malabo Montpellier panel.
Good bioeconomy allows us to create the conditions in terms of technology, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of agribusiness and manufacturing to extract more value from the resources around us. And while doing that, we solve another challenge, which is creating jobs, well-paying jobs, innovating, and absorbing the rapidly increasing number of people who will be coming to the labor markets, both from the economic development as well as reducing our carbon footprint. All of these are sufficient reasons for redoubling efforts to invest in a vibrant bioeconomy.
And we are live for the 10th meeting of the Malabo Montpellier Forum. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today to unveil the 10th report of the Malabo Montpellier panel, Nature Solutions, Policy Innovations and Opportunities for Africa's Bioeconomy. My name is Layi Butake. I am the Director of Communication and Outreach for Academia 2063, and I am joining you live from Dakar. Please go to the chat and tell us where you are joining us from. I am so excited because I know that this is going to be a high-level, high-quality conversation where we will emerge with recommendations and solutions on how the bioeconomy can become the game changer to accelerate the attainment of Africa's development agenda. This meeting is being live streamed on our YouTube channel, Malabo Montpellier Panel. Please follow the conversation on Twitter at Mamo Panel, hashtag 10th Mamo Forum. We are equally providing simultaneous interpretation in English and French. Should you need that function, please click on the globe icon on your screen. Without further ado, I am honored to kick this off by inviting the co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier panel, distinguished professor at the University of Bonn, Professor Joachim von Braun.
Thank you, Lahi. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome, especially to our forum co-chairs, His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn Bosche, and Her Excellency Ambassador Asya Ben Salah Alawi. Welcome to panel members, and a special welcome to all our speakers, participants, and guests. With this report on the opportunities of bioeconomy in Africa, we draw attention to fields of innovation that are rapidly evolving worldwide and where Africa is well positioned to create its own unique African approach. Bioeconomy refers to the application of science, technology, and innovation to the sustainable production and use of biological resources for innovative products, processes, and services in all economic sectors. As African countries are rapidly expanding their science capacity and leapfrogging into bioeconomy becomes a real opportunity. A key recommendation in the report is on strengthening links to research and development and markets for new bioproducts and biosolutions. African bioeconomy agenda shall be addressing practical and concrete issues and opportunities, such as broadly food security, carbon farming as part of the climate agenda, clean cooking fuels, meaning healthy cooking fuels, bioplastic, sustainable construction, and biopharmaceuticals. Internationally, ladies and gentlemen, bioeconomy agendas are guided by the International Advisory Council on Global Bioeconomy. 4 African leaders in bioeconomy are represented well in that council, representing Africa well in that council. And the co-chair of the council, Dr. Julius Ekuru, head of BioInnovate Africa, is speaking to us later today. Africa is also increasingly represented at the bioeconomy summits. At some point, I hope in the future, Africa should consider hosting one of the bioeconomy summits, which bring together thousands of bioeconomy players. These summits are held every 2 to 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I now warmly welcome His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn, former Prime Minister, Republic of Ethiopia, and co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier Forum. As chair of the Board of AGRA, His Excellency is well known for his strategic leadership on agriculture and food systems issues. Of note is also that His Excellency is together with his wife leading the Haile Mariam and Roman Foundation, a foundation focusing on health and nutrition and climate-smart ecotourism and conservation. So with this background, His Excellency Haile Mariam is squarely in the realm of bioeconomy. Dear Haile Mariam, please take the floor. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Joachim. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, Ministers of Agriculture and Environment, Professor Youssef, Dr. Badiane, members of the Malabo Montpellier panel, my fellow co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier Forum, Ambassador Alawi, representatives of the African Union, representatives of development partner organizations, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is my pleasure to be participating in this 10th meeting of the Malabo Montpellier Forum, for which I serve as co-chair with my sister. And I'm delighted to welcome you all. The topic of our meeting today, developing a sustainable bioeconomy for Africa, could not be more timely and is of particular importance this year. And with the UN Biodiversity and Climate Conference on the horizon and the coming dates, I think it is very much timely. These past years have been challenging for the world and our continent in particular. You know, COVID-19 coupled with severe floods and droughts in my own region, Horn of Africa, and several locust invasions in several other African countries, and also there are internal conflicts in my continent and civil war. But currently, a war in Ukraine are testing our systems and our resilience to withstand shocks and prolonged stress. And it has seriously affected our food systems, and producers' prices are extremely low, while inputs are either more expensive or even not available. The pandemic, in particular, has put at jeopardy decades of continued progress on an economic development, not only in my own country, but across the whole continent, and has set back progresses on countries' abilities to deliver on the targets set under the African Union Agenda 2063. Within the Agenda 2063, the Malabo Declaration and its targets, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. Policymakers are grappling with uncertainties surrounding food supply, demand, and trade, and identifying the most appropriate measures to ensure that the pandemic or climate shocks and the ongoing wars do not translate into the severe and prolonged food crisis. Wheat, maize, and oilseed prices have surged in particular, and the FAO's food price index has reached historical highs. In my own country, Ethiopia, 35%, and food prices have skyrocketed in the past few weeks. People are struggling to make ends meet, especially with unemployment hitting new record levels. There is a significant shortage of food commodities such as bread and oil, which is very important, especially for the poor, and prices have soared. As a result, many bakeries have had to shut down. Fuel prices have increased by at least 30%. In some areas, even went up to 50% over the last few weeks. And there is an acute shortage in some places. On top of that, Ethiopia is suffering its worst drought in decades. Of course, not only Ethiopia, but the whole Horn of Africa region, Kenya, Somalia, and in some parts of Sudan as well, and Eritrea. And climate change has made the typical rainy season either much shorter or virtually non-existent. And when the rain does fall in these conditions, the ground is unable to absorb all the waters, and destructive floods can easily and quickly degrade our soils. Moreover, a recent plague of locusts has devastated crops in several regions of the country. However, ladies and gentlemen, I am an optimist. And it was with great enthusiasm that I learned some months ago that the topic of the Malabo Montpellier panel's newest report would focus on developing sustainable bioeconomies in Africa. This is an opportunity. With this report on the opportunities of a bioeconomy, the Malabo Montpellier panel draws attention to fields of innovations that are rapidly evolving worldwide, where Africa is well positioned to create its own unique approach, and in fact could take a leading role in the world. The evolution of the bioeconomy is defined by mega trends and the need to respond to them. Climate change is one, biodiversity issues, a growing world population, socio-economic pressure, and the rapid development of new sciences. This has resulted in a growing recognition of the importance of sustainable biological processes and products among emerging and advancing economies. Industries related to construction, food and agriculture, bioenergy, and biopharmaceuticals are significantly connected or based on bioprocesses. The use of biomass in these industries can reduce their impact on the environment and global climate, create new and well-paid jobs, and spark future innovation. Today, we will hear about lessons and experiences from several African countries that have been leading the way in transitioning to or developing a bioeconomy. And my wish is that we will leave today's forum even inspired and enriched with new ideas and vision for our countries and the continent. In Ethiopia, when I was in office, we have developed a dedicated biotechnology policy. And already in 2015, a study explored the potential of biogas production in my country. It used byproducts from coffee processing. You know, Ethiopia is the largest producer of coffee, including husks, pulp, and mucilage. The findings showed that the anaerobic digestion of these products could generate as much as 238,000 megawatt hours of electricity and 273,000 megawatt hours of thermal energy. The coffee processing facilities could then use the energy generated from that biogas production, which could lead to energy cost saving for the industry. I'm also proud to say that in 2020, as a group of 7 Eastern African countries, namely Burundi, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, South Sudan, and Uganda, and with the support of the Bioresource Innovations Network for Eastern Africa Development, we call it BioInnovate Africa, we developed a regional innovation-driven bioeconomy strategy that enables the pooling of resources to address shared regional priorities. The strategy aims to inspire and catalyze the development of national bioeconomy strategies and of subsequent policy developments and interventions that can create new jobs and sustainable bio-based and inclusive economic growth in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, a bioeconomy provides a real opportunity for policymakers on the continent to reimagine, redesign, and recalibrate how economic activities are distributed or redistributed across their countries to support job creation, poverty alleviation, and economic growth across urban, peri-urban, and rural areas. One way to do this could be through the provision of locational infrastructure in select regions and spaces to drive bioeconomy development. For example, where existing infrastructure is unable to support new bio-based industries, policymakers may look at providing infrastructure for biorefineries and manufacturing in locations that are at some distance from industrial hubs and nearer to biomass production. This has been the preferred approach in my own country, where large-scale integrated agro-industrial parks for agro-processing, mostly in rural areas, have been promoted. The park offers shared infrastructure such as roads, power, water, communication facilities, laboratory facilities, and byproduct utilization. They also extend additional fiscal incentives for private sector investors to process and transform local crop and livestock production into exportable goods. They provide the ideal environment for developing a dynamic, sustainable bioeconomy in Ethiopia. Let me close by saying that 14 African countries are currently in the process of drafting the first generation of dedicated bioeconomy and bioeconomy-related strategies, while the East African community is set to complete its regional strategy. Now is the time to rapidly update and transform Africa's science capacities, skills development, innovation, entrepreneurship, and infrastructure, so that leapfrogging into bioeconomy becomes a real opportunity. The experience of 4 African countries that are at the forefront of innovation, innovative actions, and leadership at the institutional, policy, and programmatic levels, thus offers a wealth of lessons for implication and scaling up and out across the continent. I look forward, therefore, to the deliberations today and to learning from our colleagues from across the continent and representing a variety of stakeholders. At this juncture, I would like to thank all the presenters, and I wish us all a fruitful dialogue and exchange at this forum, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Haile Mariam, for your optimistic address. Indeed, now is the time to leverage its abundant resources for the development of a vibrant bioeconomy. Thank you so much for your address, and thank you, Professor Von Braun, for your opening remarks. It is now time for us to hear from the co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier panel and executive chairperson of Academia 2063.
Looks like you broke up. All right, I take it from there. Thank you very much, Lai, for welcoming me. And thank you to those who have joined us here today. Your Excellency, Prime Minister Desalegan, and Your Excellency Ambassador Asia Ben Salah, my colleague co-chair Joachim von Braun, and those of the panel who have joined us, but also the representative of the countries and regional economic communities are here today with us. To all of you, welcome, and all protocol observed. I would not continue before recognizing His Excellency Minister Law of Malawi. Welcome, sir, for joining us today. And my elder brother and friend, Dr. Mohamed Al-Khadi from Morocco. It's a pleasure to have you and to see you in the audience here. Everybody else, welcome to the 10th Malabo Montpellier Forum event on bioeconomy. To link it to current events, what we are seeing, not just from COVID, but in particular the Ukraine crisis, there is a need for us to be much more creative and innovative in diversifying our food sources, where we get foods, both in terms of variety of foods, not just a few that we depend on and desperate if there's a shock, but also in terms of a healthy mix of a supply chains between shorter and longer supply chains. And finally, doing something about the cost of food as well, so that more people can absorb shocks to food prices when they happen. Now, we can look into traditional areas to find the solutions or in new and emerging areas. And I think this report and what's in there is pointing to potential opportunities to create new sources, not just for food, but also for employment, for wealth, for new materials, and so on. I would not dwell on much on the content of the report because I know you're going to have a substantive presentation, but also His Excellency the Selegan, as well as my co-chair, Professor Von Braun, have spoken quite a bit about the importance of the bioeconomy and what it entails. I will perhaps just tell a little bit about the work of the panel and the forum to give you a context and a background to this meeting. Just like we're looking at bioeconomy today, the work of the panel is to look at strategic areas of critical importance to the African agenda today and in the future. And the way we look at it is a little bit different, in particular to the way we do business. We don't look at the complexity of the issues involved. All we're interested in looking at is to understand where has progress been made in those areas and what are the factors underlying that progress and the lessons to be drawn from there to facilitate replication and scaling up. So when we start in a new area, we develop a methodology to rank African countries and take the top 6, 5, or 4 of those countries, and we carry out studies to understand what they did to make progress possible. And when we say what they did, it is in terms of what other countries can learn from and replicate and imitate. And we do believe that the easier things for countries to learn and imitate are things that are actions that are undertaken by governments that other governments can use to catalyze activity and progress in their countries. And when we do that, we then look therefore at what institutional innovation those countries have carried out to enable them to make progress, what kind of policy innovation reforms they've undertaken, and what kind of programmatic intervention they have carried out. All 3 bundles of activities that any government can look at if they're willing to do the same thing, to copy, to replicate, to imitate, and to scale up. So that's what we did in the case of bioeconomy. You will hear from my colleagues presenting the report. We looked at the leading countries in Africa: Ghana, Uganda, Namibia, and South Africa. This is a really very, very green area where we need to do quite a lot more. South Africa is one of only 15 countries around the globe that have a full-fledged comprehensive bioeconomy strategy. Others are following suit, as we'll hear from the report. And we also heard from the opening remarks from Prime Minister Selegan how many other countries are all embarking into this journey. The promises of bioeconomy are enormous for our countries. So the report has detailed what is possible, what the opportunities are. So that is the work of the Malabo Montpellier panel. And once we do, we hand over the report and table it at an event like this today, which is under the Malabo Montpellier Forum, which is the twin activity to the Malabo Montpellier panel. And forum is co-chaired by Ambassador Bensala and Prime Minister Selegan. So we welcome you to this event today. We hope you will have an entertaining, enlightening presentation and discussion and interaction. So welcome to all of you who are taking your time to join us. And again, thank you to our co-chairs and our friend panelists who are here. I will now hand over to Lai Butaki, our Director of Communications, to lead us to the next phase of this program today. Thank you, everybody. Nice having you with us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Badian. I hope everyone can hear me now. We will be moving on to present this much talked about report, Nature Solutions, Policy, Innovations, and Opportunities for Africa's Bioeconomy. As you know, the Malabo Montpellier panel is facilitated by Academia 2063, the University of Bonn, and Imperial College London. and it is made up of a panel of 18 experts in agriculture and food security. We are about to hear from two of these experts. First up, we will be listening to Engineer Dr. Dorothy Okello, who will be making a presentation on the report. She is a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel and Dean of the School of Engineering at Makerere University. Dr. Okello, over to you.
Hey, thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone, where you are. It's a pleasure to present a quick outline of this report as the first part of our presentation. And in that, I will highlight the main report findings, and which highlights, one, what is the bioeconomy? We'll start off with that. We'll then look at what are the opportunities that created by the bioeconomy, and then look at some thoughts in terms of what is the enabling environment, and kindly request for some assistance with the slides. So moving on to what is the bioeconomy. And here we had a definition well shared earlier before with us. And what we're looking at is referring to the production and utilization of biological resources, applying science and technology across all economic sectors to facilitate productive innovations and to ensure a more sustainable use of the resources. And in this case, the definition goes well beyond the traditional production-oriented approach in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. There is added prominence of knowledge, both scientific and traditional, technology and innovation, as well as an emphasis on the development of bio-based processes, products, and services. A bioeconomy thus extends the use of biomass beyond food, feed, and fiber to include a range of pharmaceutical, industrial, and other value-added products, such as green chemicals, industrial materials, and energy. And therefore, developing a sustainable and circular bioeconomy for Africa offers opportunities to use knowledge and biological resource to provide products, processes, and services that optimize the social, economic, and environmental benefits for a continent that is seeking to achieve societal prosperity. A sustainable and circular bioeconomy can serve as a broad range of development needs, from food and nutrition to energy and decent jobs. And this is detailed in the report, and I'll highlight a bit more about this. Next slide, please. So if we look at then some of the continental and regional frameworks that are underpinning this area. And we start first at continental level, where we have the Africa Union CISA of the 10-year strategy that aims to transform Africa into a knowledge-based and innovation-led society. It identifies food security, nutrition, and eradication of hunger as top three out of the 10 priority areas that are listed in terms of where these would be of most benefit for the increased application of science, technology, and innovation. The CISA, or the strategy, also promotes human capital development, innovation, value addition, industrialization, and entrepreneurship, as well as calling upon the AU member states to upgrade their science, technology, and innovation infrastructure, to strengthen the innovation and entrepreneurship environment, and allocate at least 1% of GDP to research and development. Still at the Africa level, we have also the African Biosciences Initiative, which is the flagship program of the Science and Technology Consolidated Plan of Action, which fits into the agricultural, environmental, and health strategies of NEPAD, and currently implemented through 4 regional bioscience networks, including SunBio, as it's referred to in the South African case study that is within the report. Also at Africa level, we have the bioenergy policy, which is a joint effort by the African Union Commission and UNECA. And this was published in 2013. And this policy framework emphasizes the role of regional coordination for the production, trade, and use of bioenergy. And these coordination efforts include the harmonization of policies that facilitate the development of a viable modern bioenergy sector led by the regional economic communities. Still also at the Africa level, we have the biological intellectual property, which is a continental strategy for geographical indications by the departments of agriculture, rural development, blue economy, and sustainable development of the AU. And this IP policy aims to align IP goals with the AU Agenda 2063, with CADEP, with the Malabo Declaration, and also with the Sustainable Development Goals. We have also at a regional level coming down. So we have the Africa level, we have cross-cutting as the IP policy, and then we have also the regional efforts. And here, for example, we have the Eastern Africa community, which has produced its own bioeconomy strategy that's awaiting adoption. And I'm happy to report that as part of this forum, Dr. Julia Sechuru, one of our speakers today, will talk about more of this in the next session. Next slide, please. Yes. So in terms of the opportunities then, okay, in terms of the opportunities then that are created by the bioeconomy developed, we can see from the slides that we have quite a variety on this. And this includes a sustainable economy. Bioeconomy can help Africa progress to more sustainable production and consumption practices, in addition to accelerating progress towards its continental and global development commitments. This also includes the use of renewable biological resources, particularly those derived from agriculture, that can also help address and accelerate global sustainability. We also have the application of research and knowledge, both scientific and indigenous, that can enhance conventional linear value chains into more complex interconnected value webs, which would reuse waste from processes to create new products. In terms of enhanced new value chains, we also have the opportunities in terms of jobs. Employment opportunities are also created through the application of cutting-edge bioscience and biotechnology for example, in agro-processing and other value addition. Also, we have issues around food security, and indeed a transition to a bio-based economy can accelerate the kind of growth in productivity that is crucial to improving food security and nutrition, and this would then contribute to rural development and overall economic growth. There are some trade-offs that we need to be mindful about, and this is because developing of a bioeconomy requires careful consideration of the trade-offs and spillover effects that manifest in producing and consuming more biomass. For example, the overuse of and competition for water resources and land, the loss of natural vegetation and biodiversity, reduced food security, labor competition, and therefore there is need for careful design of projects. For example, inclusivity and co-locating biomass and feedstock production with food production can avoid or mitigate potential conflicts. Next slide, please. Okay, and so if we now look at, as we look to wrap up in terms of the enabling environment, and here again, we see a number of factors that we need to take into consideration. Why? Because a bio-based transition is a long-term commitment that requires planning and investments in biomass production, in human capacity and innovation systems, as well as in the manufacturing capacity. And so we have different players. So at the higher level, in terms of governance, governments actually, and you'll see this in the report, are taking different approaches to facilitating the establishment of a bioeconomy. For example, Brazil and Tanzania are focusing on increasing agricultural productivity, whereas South Africa, Kenya are focusing on transitioning away from fossil fuels, increasing agricultural productivity, fostering new and efficient biomass use, and developing new industries and sectors. And also there's need for demand. And governments also can have a role in this, and they can generate demand using a carrot and stick approach by discouraging, on the one hand, discouraging unsustainable and environmentally harmful practices and products, such as conventional pesticides and plastics, while on the other hand, rewarding improved practices, products, and technologies, such as biopesticides, clean energy, and the others. They can also deploy product standards, certification, and labeling so as to accelerate the uptake of bioproducts and bio solutions. IP is another key area, and we need a strong intellectual property regime that provides copyrights, patents, trademarks, and similar rights to the developers of this knowledge into products, so that also drives the bio-based transition. In addition, we need an effective and dynamic national science and research and innovation ecosystem that is made up of education systems, public and private research institutions, and a thriving private sector that's able to scale the production and dissemination of innovations into mainstream products. A sustainable bioeconomy relies on access to energy, water, transport. So infrastructure is another big area, data and information, in order to improve biomass production, support research and innovation, and provide access to markets for bioproducts. So previous MAMO panels reports have covered energy, water, and digitalization, but important to remember that investment in infrastructure for bioeconomy does not always need to be large scale, nor does it need to be deployed at scale immediately. So that's a major advantage, because small modular approaches to constructing biorefineries and incubators can allow for flexibility in the speed and timing up of scaling up, for example, once funding is secured. Then we have also finance. And this is another big area. By positioning the establishment of the bioeconomy within the wider global climate and health transitions, African governments can mobilize funds beyond their own natural resources and access sources through for example, the European Green Deal, the Global Environment Fund, and the Green Climate Fund. All of these calls for significant partnerships and collaborations. And so I would like to conclude the first part of our presentation here, and thank you all for your kind attention. I give back the floor to Dr. Butake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okello, for your presentation. I will now invite Ms. Nashilala Kombo, who is the country director for WWF Zambia and a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Butake, for inviting me to complement my sister, Dr. Okello, in sharing some key highlights in terms of what we are learning on what different countries across the African continent are doing to build an ecosystem for an effective and sustainable bioeconomy. I should also say that, as the report notes, different African countries are at different stages of developing the bioeconomy sectors. And I think, as has been mentioned earlier by our co-chair, this is a very important year globally for biodiversity, but also for Africa. So the report is indeed very, very timely, and Africa can build a lot in terms of how some of the pioneering countries have already, what they've already done, or what they've put in place to create these ecosystems. As you know, we are behind as Africa in terms of our biodiversity targets. We also know that a fifth of Africa's global biodiversity is in Africa. And therefore, a bioeconomy, a successful bioeconomy, provides us an opportunity not only to advance our biodiversity targets or our global climate targets, but also really deal with some of the biggest socioeconomic issues that we face as a continent. So one of the key areas that the target countries has actually looked at is in creating this enabling environment. And I think that Professor had touched on that. So the focus of my presentation is basically to share with you major highlights in terms of what has enabled success in 4 countries that have made most progress, share with you the methodology of how we arrived at the 4 countries, and identify some of the key findings that would give us direction on perhaps the Africa-wide direction of travel on how we can accelerate the development of the bioeconomy sector in Africa. Next slide. So I will not go into defining the bioeconomy as it was done by my colleague. I just want to stress that in selecting the front runners, a 2-step process was done. The first one was to establish the existing strong positive relationship between innovation and manufacturing, and data from the Global Innovation Index and also the World Bank National Accounts was looked at. Data also from the OECD National Accounts for manufacturing. You might want to know that only 1.9% of global manufacturing is coming from Africa. The number is very low. And so again, the bioeconomy sector, if developed systematically, would provide an opportunity to change that number and to change Africa from being a primarily raw material exporting and producing country. The second step also juxtaposes the innovation against biomass extraction. And again, data was put together from the G2 and UNRP Global Materials Flows database. You might also want to know that over the last few years, the World Bank has supported a number of African governments to start creating what are referred to as natural capital accounts. And these are accounts basically that attempt to put a monetary value behind the various natural resources that we have in different sectors. Next slide. Next slide. So as was mentioned earlier, there were only 4 case studies that were picked at. Basically, we used 2 metrics. One, we've identified countries that both had a very high G2 quotient, which is really around innovation. And these include Mauritius, South Africa, Namibia, Uganda, Ghana, and Tanzania, but also countries that had an incredibly high biomass content. So if you look at what each of these 4 countries have done, I think they give us some instructions in terms of some of getting the basics right in terms of creating an ecosystem for developing the bioeconomy sectors in different African countries. If you go to the next slide. The next slide, please. Okay. As we all know, we've heard the president of Ghana speaking about the need for Ghana to start selling chocolate and not cocoa. And so there's been a focus in terms of scaling up the success that's been around the cocoa subsector, around the cashew and the shea subsectors. I think one of the distinctive features of the bioeconomy sector in Ghana is that the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research receives about 50% of public agriculture investment or financing into their research and development. The whole aspect in terms of the role of the scientific and education sector is critically important to build the knowledge base that would harness the natural resources and combine the technologies that are needed to create a stream of products to support and to respond to the bioeconomy. You also note that in the case of Ghana, in the report, the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana and the Cocoa Board are processing cocoa and cashew nuts and their byproducts. And again, the work that is being done is being supported by reasonable investments in research. Ghana also has made some good progress in terms of effective incorporation of herbal medication into healthcare delivery. And again, what that means is that the products that are developed to meet health needs from bioeconomy are integrated. There is a demand within the health sector. There's certification, there's intellectual property, and there's a raft of aspects from the enabling environment that have been created to facilitate the development of bioproducts to support the healthcare industry. And what this does is that it changes the numbers in terms of providing job opportunities for Africa's young people, for Ghana's young people. It also does a lot in terms of really helping the country build better around its economic diversification and building up its manufacturing base. Next slide. So Namibia is one of the African countries that have quite unique biodiversity in terms of its world flora and fauna, in terms of its climate, in terms of its topology. A lot of the investments in Namibia have gone science. Namibia has had dedicated institutional frameworks and policies that have guided the development of the bioeconomy sector. From the Vision 2030 to the National Development Plan to the National Biodiversity Strategies and Namibia's Sustainable Blue Economy Policy, there has been an attempt and a focus to develop a dedicated bioeconomy strategy. You will be aware that Namibia is one of the countries in Southern Africa where the tourism sector is quite well developed, and a policy and strategy has been identified where wildlife resources have been harnessed to transform rural communities. Namibia also has worked and ensured that public and private institutions are working hand in hand in terms of supporting the bioeconomy development in that country. So as you can both from the case of Ghana and from the case of Namibia, the role of policy is very important. The role of research and investment in research is very important. And in the case of Namibia, you see a stronger role of the private sector in terms of driving bioeconomy development. Next slide. In terms of South Africa, as you know, it has positioned itself as a market where world-class bio-innovation is going to be developed, is under development. It's got the first ever comprehensive bioeconomy policy approved by its cabinet in Africa. It's got quite an advanced system of innovation that also supports and it creates the enabling environment for the bioeconomy sector as well, in terms of allowing the development of a range of bioeconomy related products, from pharmaceutical products to food related products to products that are aimed at meeting the energy needs of the country. There's been strong institutional support as part of the infrastructure to support the bioeconomy. There's been financing and investments that are targeted, and there's been attractive IP environment in terms of really supporting the takeoff of the bioeconomy sector. A number of programs have been created to guide investments as well as stakeholder collaboration. Some of the selected institutions that have played a very vital role has been the Bioinnovation Chief Directorate at the Department for Science and Innovation. There's also been a strong role for the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research that has been leading the way around biomanufacturing industry. There's also been a strong role for the South African National Bioinformatics Institute. So as Professor Okello did mention earlier, the role of data has been very key in terms of supporting the development of the bioeconomy in a number of these country cases that we looked at. Next slide. So Uganda, among other actors, Makerere University, there's been a focus in terms of really building the hub of excellence on agriculture R&D that has shaped the development of the bioeconomy sector in that country. There has been an environment that has been created to encourage the development of incubators, where a number of bioeconomy related products have been developed. Right now, Uganda has a draft bioeconomy policy, and we note initial successes in the processing of matoke and herbal medicine. As I mentioned earlier, the biggest challenge we have in Africa is that we're still not adding value to our raw materials, despite having policy statements, despite wanting to economically diversify. And these 4 countries have shown us how certain key steps can be put in place to start making that transformation. Next slide. Next slide. Right. So based on what we have learned in these case studies and perhaps globally, these reports provide some recommendation in terms of a potential action agenda that could help the bioeconomy sector in Africa develop at scale. The first one is to identify the gateway sectors through which to initiate the development of a transition to a bioeconomy. And I think here what we're talking about is how do we ensure that there's focused learning that is happening. And so if a country decides to focus on agri-related sector, the learning should be informed by some of the gateway sectors before the changes are translated to perhaps the economy-wide policies and programs. Secondly, there's a need to strengthen the R&D. And as mentioned earlier, our educational institutions, our research institutions need to transform so that more focus is put around the science and the technology that is needed to support market development for bioproducts and biosolutions. Thirdly, it was noted that there's a need for a demand or a market for the bioproducts and biosolutions. As we have seen across the African continent, we are facing severe impacts of climate change. A number of our ecosystems that our people depend on have degraded enormously. And so the bioeconomy approach gives us an opportunity of really making sure that there's sustainable production, management, and consumption of these natural resources. But for these to be sustainable and long-lasting, there needs to be a sustainable market and taste and demand that is created for the bioproducts. Fourth, there's a need to regulate for sustainability of incentives and to manage the trade-offs. I think where an bioeconomy activity has not started, we heard that in Ethiopia, fiscal incentives played a very big role in terms of catalyzing private sector investment and action to enable the development of the bioeconomy sector. And I think this applies across the board. The fifth measure or recommendation is the need to set up an independent national advisory board to inform and guide the development of bioeconomy in different African countries. So this is basically the action agenda that is proposed from the Nature Solutions report. I think we have a once in a lifetime opportunity for Africa to leapfrog the development of the bioeconomy sector. Why? We've got global commitments and Africans on commitment to deliver. We are incredibly behind in terms of meeting our job targets that our Africa's young people are pushing for. Again, the number in terms of Africa's contribution to global manufacturing is too low, and something needs to be done. And again, the bioeconomy sector provides an opportunity for us to accelerate that. The voice from Africa through an emphasis on bioeconomy can be different in the development of the global biodiversity framework that will be agreed on later on this year. So basically, where a strategic plan, a roadmap is going to be created on how the world can minimize the massive loss of biodiversity. For us as Africa, our biodiversity, our natural, our comparative advantage. So it's critically important. Use and sustainable management and sustainable production becomes a political priority. Thank you very much. I will now pass it on to the moderator to pick it up from here. And just to emphasize that this report nicely ties up with previous reports that the Malabo Montpellier panel has produced that are looking at some of the subsectors where the bioeconomy sector can be developed, where the entry points can be created. Thank you very much. So I'll pass it over back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nashilala Kombo, for your insightful presentation. And now it's time for us to get into the meat and potatoes of the Malabo Montpellier panel bioeconomy report. It is my pleasure to welcome the moderator of our panel discussion. She is the head of Department, Agricultural Economics, Extension and Rural Development at the University of Pretoria, and a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel, Professor Cheryl Hendricks.
Good day. Thank you so much for the introduction. Your Excellencies, honorable co-chairs of the forum, the co-chairs of the panel, and to all the participants, good day, and thank you for the opportunity to chair what should be a really exciting panel of 5 people involved directly in driving the bioeconomy and in their countries and in Africa. It's always a delight for me to participate in the Malabo Montpellier panel discussions. As I daily reflect and catch up on what happened in the last 24 hours in our global situation, I'm always struck by how little we've learned through the lessons of crises and of the past. And I think one of the joys of participating in this panel is the focus on not only learning from crises, but how we can learn from the daily activities that African governments are making to make progress on the development agenda. And so for me, sharing these positive experiences is a real delight. So if we can turn to our first panel member, Dr. Adolphe Adjenahome, who's director of the National Institute for Agricultural Research from Benin. So you've been involved in the process in Benin, and we've heard that the bioeconomy is a vital element for poverty reduction and sustainable development transitions. But we also know, as the previous MEMA panel report on energy spoke about, that we really do need energy development for taking these ideas of development forward in Africa. Can you please share with us what the government of Benin is doing to support the development of the energy sector through renewable energy, and particularly with using bio-waste? Over to you, sir. Dr. Adolphe there. There we go. So just for those of you, sorry, so if for those of you who just need the translation, just look at the bottom of your bar and you can get the translation. Go ahead, sorry. Go ahead.
Je peux y aller?
Mm-hmm.
Voilà, je disais, merci beaucoup. Je disais que je suis Adolphe Adjanou. Je suis le directeur général de l'Institut national de recherche du Bénin. J'ai eu le privilège et l'honneur d'être désigné par son Excellence M. Gaston Kossou-Dossoui, ministre de l'Agriculture, de l'Élevage et de la Pêche du Bénin, qui au dernier moment a été empêché. Son Excellence Monsieur le ministre de l'Agriculture du Bénin me charge de vous présenter ses compliments et ses excuses. Mesdames et messieurs les coprésidents, chers participants, au nom de Monsieur le ministre de l'Agriculture, je dois dire que plusieurs événements, comme l'ont dit mes illustres prédécesseurs, ont montré la fragilité et la vulnérabilité des systèmes économiques de bon nombre de pays africains. En effet, nos économies fortement dépendantes des importations sont souvent exposées à des chocs exogènes qui engendrent des crises avec des répercussions graves sur les populations. Pour exemple, si vous me permettez, je citerai juste la crise économique de 2008-2009 qui a eu des conséquences désastreuses sur le système alimentaire, ce qui a généré des tensions sociales qui sont traduites par des soulèvements contre la cherté des produits de grande consommation ou de première nécessité. Le recours à la bioéconomie, qui vise l'exploitation rationnelle et durable des ressources biologiques locales ou endogènes pour générer des produits de consommation partiellement ou totalement substituables aux produits d'importation, est donc extrêmement salutaire. Il importe de préciser que le développement des énergies renouvelables et l'utilisation des biodéchets sont du ressort au Bénin de plusieurs ministères. Il s'agit du ministère de l'Énergie, le ministère de l'Environnement, le ministère de l'Agriculture. Donc, toutefois, le ministère de l'Agriculture, de l'Élevage et de la Pêche peut indiquer que pour soutenir le développement des énergies renouvelables et l'utilisation des biodéchets, le gouvernement met l'accent sur le renforcement institutionnel et organisationnel à travers, premièrement, l'élaboration de cadres contractuels entre l'État et les communes. Les communes, c'est la gouvernance locale chez nous au Bénin. Deuxièmement, la création d'associations forestières dans ces communes-là. Troisièmement, le renforcement de la capacité de ces communes à élaborer des plans d'aménagement et de gestion des forêts. Quatrièmement, la mise en place de marchés ruraux de bioénergie. Je dois dire aussi que le Bénin dispose d'énormes potentialités en énergie renouvelable. Il s'agit de la biomasse, on en a suffisamment parlé tout à l'heure. Il s'agit des aménagements hydroélectriques avec une dizaine de sites plus ou moins de grande capacité et une centaine de petits sites de petite capacité. Il y a aussi les potentialités pour l'énergie solaire et l'énergie éolienne. Pour développer ce potentiel et en application de la politique bioénergie de la CEDEAO, adoptée par les chefs d'État de la CEDEAO le 4 juillet 2017, le gouvernement du Bénin a mis en place un instrument de financement des énergies renouvelables et un programme de renforcement des capacités nationales de planification et de gestion du sous-secteur des combustibles domestiques et de maîtrise de la bioénergie. Maintenant, de façon spécifique, je vais citer quelques réalisations phares. En matière de bioénergie, en matière de biomasse énergie, entendez par là les bois de feu, charbon de bois et les déchets végétaux, qui chez nous jouent un rôle de premier plan dans l'approvisionnement énergétique du pays, de par sa contribution à la consommation finale et totale d'énergie. Ça fait environ 60%. Dans ce cas, les principales actions sont la promotion de l'accès des ménages aux équipements de cuisson et des applications modernes de biomasse énergie. Ceci est fait à travers le développement des capacités institutionnelles de ce secteur, la conception et la mise en place du système d'information écologique forestier, l'aménagement de l'accès des ménages aux équipements de cuisson à gaz et aux foyers améliorés, et l'appui aux producteurs locaux d'équipements de cuisson à gaz ou à l'éthanol. Il y a aussi la structuration d'une filière biomasse combustible, avec notamment l'utilisation des déchets de l'agriculture. Entendez par là les tiges de coton, les déchets de palmier à huile, les balles de riz, les coques de noix d'anacarde et autres résidus de récolte. Il y a aussi la création de conditions favorables à la production de biocarburants en évitant bien sûr le conflit entre la sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle des populations. Et pour cela, le Bénin mise sur la production et la valorisation du jatropha, du ricin et d'autres plantes. Il y a aussi la mise en œuvre d'un projet qui est issu de la Convention sur l'Alliance globale sur le biodigesteur en Afrique de l'Ouest, porté par le Bénin, le Burkina Faso, la Côte d'Ivoire, la Guinée, le Mali, le Niger, le Sénégal et le Togo. Cette initiative, ce projet vise à mettre à la disposition des populations rurales de l'énergie propre pour la cuisson des aliments et l'éclairage, à l'effet d'améliorer la productivité et d'autres avantages connexes liés à la santé et à la protection de l'environnement. Il y a aussi la mise en œuvre du projet de promotion de la production durable de biomasse, dont l'objectif est de réduire de 1 100 000 tonnes de CO2 les émissions
Wonderful. So many rich examples of lots of activity. That's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing the broad spectrum of energy-related ideas. What opportunities do you see for creating employment through the examples that you've given, particularly for young people? Have we lost our panelist? Oh dear.
We lost him.
We've lost him. Okay, we'll come back to him. Let me move on to Dr. Julius Sekuru. You've been mentioned already, Julius. You're the head of BioInnovate Africa, and you've been mentioned through the presentations earlier. But we've heard so many opportunities, particularly in the 4 African countries and now also from Benin, and the potential for Africa to leapfrog to be a far more significant player in bioeconomy initiatives. We know that over 60 countries have established bioeconomy strategies and policies in the world, and 14 in Africa. But East Africa is about to complete its regional strategy, and you've been one of the key drivers behind the development of this East African bioeconomy strategy. This is likely to be the first regional strategy in the world, and so also very important for driving examples in Africa. So can you tell us what's the real significance of this regional strategy? Julius? I can't hear you. I can see you speaking. No sound. Oh dear. We might have to come back to you.
Yeah, Larry, do you know what's happening? Maybe he should disconnect and connect again.
Yeah.
While we move to the next speaker.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Hilda, are you there? Ms. Hilda Mputu, biotechnology specialist of the National Commission of Research, Science and Technology of Namibia. Can I just check you there before I pose the question? Yes.
Yes, I'm here, Prof. Hendricks.
Great, and we can hear you too. So we heard about your excellent example earlier, and in terms of your bioeconomy strategy and what you've been doing, particularly through the National Commission of Research for Science and Technology in collaboration with FAO. So can you help? One of the key issues that you face in Namibia is bush encroachment. Can you please help us understand where is Namibia in your bioeconomy strategy process, and how are you coordinating with stakeholders?
Thank you, Prof. Hendricks. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to take part in this forum today. I just want to start with perhaps stating that the NCRST is mandated to monitor and supervise the promotion, coordination, development, and continuation of research, science and technology, and innovation in all sectors in Namibia. Now, to get to your question, NCRST has made significant progress towards the development of the strategy. In 2018, NCRST, together with the focus groups from different sectors in Namibia, started the development of the draft bioeconomy strategy. This was in line with the National Program on Research, Science and Technology, of which the biotechnology was a priority area. It was until 2019 that the NCRST now partnered with the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, to take a stock taking and analysis report, also in line with their global project towards the sustainable bioeconomy guidelines. NCRST has constituted a bioeconomy multi-sectoral working group that consists of government institutions, private companies, non-governmental organizations, public enterprises, and higher education institutions to advise on the focus areas with the National Bioeconomy Strategy. With this, regional consultations were conducted within our 14 regions. This took place last year, 2021, of which a stock taking and analysis report was generated, and this report informed the draft National Bioeconomy Strategy. This strategy and the stock taking analysis was then presented to the key stakeholders last year as well, sometime in July, through an online platform. And then members were encouraged to do member checking so that they can just correct their inputs. And that is where the process stands currently. The next step will then be to conduct a final validation workshop, which is planned to take place next month in June, whereby stakeholders are invited to come and validate their inputs. And then we'll forward the strategy, the draft strategy, to the Minister of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation for vetting before it's submitted for cabinet approval. Now, in terms of consultations or coordinations, to make a positive impact from this strategy, it will then be achieved through coordination driven by the bioeconomy multi-sectoral working group, as well as the responsible and lead agencies under each initiative or activity under the four main strategic objectives of this strategy. However, the overall function of coordinating the implementation of the National Bioeconomy Strategy will rest with the NCRST.
Great, thank you. So you make a very important point that prioritizing this is one of the ways in which you gain the momentum for moving forward on the strategy. And initially, Namibia identified agriculture, health, and natural resources as the key priorities. What other sectors do you think are likely to emerge as you evolve the policy, and what will the role of science and technology play?
Thank you, Prof. Perhaps another sector that will emerge is renewable energy, since it's one of the powerful tools that Namibia prioritizes to meet its national development goals in terms of socio-economic development, as well as to secure energy. This can be achieved through the energy and renewable energy policy, which is also in close proximity with the National Bioeconomy Strategy being developed. For example, the use the use of energy from biomass in a power plant to generate electricity by the combustion of wood chips sourced from encroached bush, as well as municipal waste, for example, to use as bioenergy. Now, the role that STI will play, perhaps, we have a revised national policy on research, science, and technology, 2020 to 2030, which calls for the development of this national bioeconomy strategy. This STI policy gives more emphasis to coordination and management of science, technology, and innovation, sectoral development, collaboration, funding, and the need to address the institutional frameworks. The review also incorporates a programmatic approach to policy formulation. It emphasizes the need for a coherent, systematic, comprehensive approach to the determination of technological programs. Namibia takes advantage of research that strengthens agricultural biosciences innovation to ensure food security, enhance nutrition and improve health, enable job creation through the expansion and intensification of sustainable agricultural production and processing. Additionally, developing innovative digital value chains based on biodiversity, thereby diversifying income streams and mitigating risk of external shocks such as COVID-19 pandemic in order to come up with innovative digital value chain e-technologies based on biodiversity.
Wow, some amazing innovations there. The use of digital technology is fascinating. You also mentioned that you were using wood chips in renewable in energy generation. Can you give us some idea of the other products that you use through debushing, and particularly how you've structured your programs to deal with financial, economic, and social sustainability?
Perhaps other products are charcoal, animal fodder, compressed wood blocks, firewood, and fencing poles. The whole process of debushing and adding value for the above products creates employment in harvesting, processing, and logistics. Now, the program benefits from interministerial coordination, which is from the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism, taking care of sustainability, environmental related issues, including aftercare strategies to prevent bush from regrowing. This is also done in conjunction with the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization through the Growth at Home strategy for trade, marketing, and value addition support. There are other stakeholders that are involved in the sector, providing technical, financial, and advisory support, including training harvesters in various harvesting techniques and their benefits. There are incentive mechanisms, such as a subsidy scheme for improved rangeland, value chains, example, animal feed, charcoal, and market development for woody products. A number of projects are indeed supporting government's efforts to convert biomass in useful products, example, the GIZ support for debushing project. There are also several banks, like the AgriBank has pledged to support the sector by ensuring farmers and entrepreneurs will have access to financing and advisory services to turn the challenges of bush encroachment in the value addition opportunities.
Great. And how in all of this do you support and involve Indigenous communities?
In terms of supporting Indigenous communities, the bioeconomy strategy is built on the government commitment to ensure communities that manage, conserve, and use the resource are benefiting directly from these resources. The combination of various growth at home strategies and the recent Access and Benefit Sharing Act that actually came into force last year, November, for usage of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge, also drives Namibia's ambition that issue of community benefits from their reproduce and and knowledge, and are partners in innovations and efforts to add value to the various resources. The bioeconomy strategy calls for initiatives such as increasing seed funding for value addition in agricultural produce, with a focus on neglected and underutilized crops, microorganisms, and plants, and also creating accessible food processing technology stations. This strategy also calls for activities such as designing and implementing a set of internationally accepted standards and certifications for bioproducts and services in the bioeconomy in order to accelerate products for commercialization.
Sure. Clearly didn't catch you off guard with a question on Indigenous peoples and the way in which you've responded. Thank you. You put a lot of thought into your strategy, obviously. So let's go to your neighbor, South Africa, where we have Dr. Maneshree Jagmohan Naidu, who is the Director of Agricultural Biotechnology at the Department of Science and Innovation of South Africa. I'm proud to introduce you as a fellow South African, Maneshree, and great to have you contribute to the discussion. So you've heard the bar set by our neighbor, Namibia. And so you've been a real driver in this process in the South African context for a while, and have helped the country to really lead in terms of innovation and capacity on the continent. So well done for your work and your contribution, and we acknowledge that. But thinking about your experience, what do you think are some of the positives that have happened in the biotechnology process in South Africa? And where have you had to innovate to manage unintended consequences or trade-offs?
Thank you very much, Prof. Hendricks, and good afternoon to everybody. And thanks for having me on this panel. I'm very happy to be here. Perhaps where I should start is that I actually joined the Department of Science and Innovation in 2013 when the bioeconomy strategy was about to be approved by Cabinet. In fact, I was there as part of organizing the launch in 2014. And also it was a year that I started to manage the agri-bioeconomy portfolio. So it's been a long road. I think a key inputs from the start have been that when the bioeconomy strategy was launched, there was a definite intention that we are moving away from simply investing in a biotechnology, but moving towards questioning, why do we want to invest in this bio-based technology? What are we trying to drive? And so, and of course, it was building from the grounding that around, just 1 or 2 years before that, we had the National Development Plan, which really set the tone for that there needed to be an outcomes-based approach. So we were fortunate, I think, in South Africa that we had good institutional mechanisms. There were many platforms and that had been built over the years, a lot of capacity to do biotechnology. So if I talk about a positive surprise on the health sector, and my colleague, or I wouldn't say it was a happy accident, but COVID was an accident. And so when the health sector had to position themselves to respond to COVID-19, because we had the necessary strategies, the platforms, the capacity, it was easy to respond, for example, recently to the WHO call to be able to use the capacity that we had developed and use the knowledge to make a definite impact. So already the system was positioned to develop reagents, to develop diagnostic kits. We had the antigen test for detection that was developed. And we were able to use, I think the department invested something like 81 million into the COVID-19 response. And we were able to leverage the 350 million in terms of the mRNA tech transfer hub that is to be established. So I think we were well positioned on the agri sector, which is where I lead. What I can say is that there was definitely a shift change from the way we were investing in biotechnology to look at what were the socioeconomic. So we almost started to rebuild and rethink how we invest in agriculture to say, what is the value of investing in that? What are the downstream applications? We already as a country had good systems in supporting basic research. So I think it was easy enough to start setting some baseline principles in terms of in terms of how we wanted to drive the implementation of the agricultural side of the strategy, what were some of the basic principles that we wanted to drive in terms of public-private partnerships, etc. So that set the tone for how we invested and what we demanded in return in terms of the needs of the country at a national level. So while we were definitely looking at developing new innovations and technologies, and I'm happy to say that in this last 10 years, we also transitioned from becoming the Department of Science and Technology to the Department of Science and Innovation. So it wasn't only about the technologies, it became about the innovations. And with that, and you see in terms of the trends, in terms of bioeconomies, the need for value chain development, the need for making sure that we were partnering and working together all became very critical in the kinds of outcomes and impacts that we wanted to see. And I think we're starting to see the fruits of that coming out. So let me stop there for now.
No, but that leads on to my next question. So we know that getting resources committed from the minister is not an easy task. How do you convince the minister of this kind of investment? What are the returns on investment that you've seen?
So in terms of the bioeconomy, we've seen, and we've recently done an audit of the bioeconomy strategy. So we actually sitting on about 8.3% contribution to GDP. And of that, the biggest contributor is the food and beverage and tobacco sector. And second, at 36%, and agriculture contributes 34%, but that's agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. And I think on our forestry side, we already, in terms of our investments in biotechnology, we're already working very closely with industry where the biotechnology was used to determine and to screen trees at an early stage, so that you were able to determine the value of your forestry industry 15 years in advance in terms of what benefits you would reap. So in terms of convincing the minister, I think when we've always had good support for the bioeconomy. We've always had good linkages with the strategies of our department in terms of the bioeconomy. So if I paint the picture, and maybe this is the biggest convincing point, we were well aligned with the National Development Plan in terms of outcome-based. Definitely the bioeconomy brought the aspect of the need to ensure socioeconomic impact. So maybe in health and agriculture, it was already very easy to start convincing government to put resources into this. And the thing is to note is that as a DSI, we've moved the needle even further, that in taking forward the next decadal plan that is currently being discussed, and the new white paper on science, technology, and innovation that was developed in 2019, it started to drive home the need for inclusivity, for transformation, and also partnerships, so that as well as entrepreneurship. So it started to build the transition in terms of our strategies was very easy for us. The bioeconomy was right up the street in terms of the value it could contribute in terms of socioeconomic impacts. Mm-hmm. In agriculture, we already started to look at the value that we could get by leveraging of, because in South Africa, farmers pay levies when they deliver produce at the farm gate. So through the levies collected, a portion goes to research, a portion goes also to, am I moving on to the next?
Great.
So a portion goes a portion goes to research, and a portion goes to transformation. So it was very easy to start, well, not easy at first, but we had a definite intent that we wanted to drive public-private partnerships. We wanted to bring all stakeholders on board, including science councils, universities, NGOs, to look at how collectively we could achieve our national goals. And I think there was a willingness from the private sector in terms of how these innovations and these investments could build a national, create a better quality of life for all. So within the bioeconomy, like I said, there was alignment, but there's also alignment in general in terms of our science and innovation, our decadal plan for the Department of Science and Innovation, in terms of really making sure that we start to ensure that science and innovation makes an impact in terms of the people's daily lives. So when it comes to hydrogen security, when it comes to service delivery innovation, these are other aspects outside of the bioeconomy that's also part of the national strategy. So I think it was very easy to sort of ensure alignment, to convince partners to come on board. And we have demonstrated quite a number of projects where we could support the technology, but also start to show how this technology can be transferred, how they can be accessed. And more recently, we're moving towards how we can build scientifically validated knowledge databases that enable access to digital technologies. And there's a few small projects in terms of pilots on that. Thanks.
Sure, exciting plans ahead. But you speak quite often of the private sector role. What does the private sector bring to advancing the plan?
So in terms of the private sector, it's quite a number of things. So like I said, first it's leveraging of the co-funding and both on the health sector and in agriculture, there's been a lot of investment, but in South Africa, the commodity organizations are quite well organized. So when it comes to supporting, for example, farmer development support, they're well organized in terms of providing input support, other aspects of the whole value chain approach. So it doesn't become our responsibility merely to invest in the technology, but it's the other aspects in the value chain, those gaps that become critical, and the support needed to those farmers to ensure that whilst they access the technology, they also have the mentoring, the know-how, the support in terms of growing their businesses to become commercial. So, and a definite intent of the government strategy is to grow the number of farmers who are part of the formal economy. It's not a secret that in South Africa, 80% of the commercial farmers, 80% of the farmers produce most of South Africa's food, and that is, but they are the smallest component. So they might be between 35 or 40,000 farmers, whereas there are large numbers of smallholder farmers in excess of 700,000 who are not yet part of the formal economy. And the potential value, both in creating, in reducing the rural-urban divide, in creating sustainable livelihoods becomes critical. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Have you got one last word of advice for other countries who are listening? What would be your one piece of advice for other countries who want to advance agricultural transformation through the bioeconomy?
Particularly transformation or bioeconomy in general?
Well, yeah, general, yeah.
So I think you know, in South Africa, and particularly in agriculture, I'll speak from my own experience. And I've also, about 2 years ago, did a study on what would be the obstacles to commercializing technologies in agriculture. And a critical thing is, because it's niche, because it's small, the window of opportunity to commercialize an agricultural technology is small. So at the outset, it's the market that informs, and the previous speaker, Miss, sorry, I missed her name, Miss Kondo, sort of spoke to it. The issue of sort of defining the market at the outset more clearly becomes critical, because that is one of your biggest obstacles if you at the outset haven't done sufficient studies. And I know that very often somebody would say they've done a feasibility study, but it's really about this value chain analysis to say what is the real opportunity for a particular commodity to succeed, whether it's you know, creating spaces for the domestic market or the international market. But what is the unique opportunity? Why would you want to invest in that in that value chain and in that technology, and sort of lining up those players and looking at what are the gaps. So particularly on the private sector, we bring them in earlier in the project as well. So these become some of the key building blocks in terms of, and we have a specific sector in our strategy in agriculture where we look at value chain analysis and value chain development, so that when you decide to invest in a technology to plug into that value chain, you already know where do you want to go with this, and it's nicely mapped out in terms of who you need to bring on board, because the time, like I said, to market then becomes very critical. Over and above that, issues around funding management. Obviously, they need to be sufficient. So a really good feasibility study convinces a funder to put funding into it. So funding is also a challenge, and having sufficient amounts of funding. And in some instances, you know, if you want to start small, you know, you can also grow this value chain in terms of first the supply side before you're ready to put up a factory, for example. So let me stop there.
Thank you ever so much. Some real inspiration for other countries. Thank you, Dr. Jagmohan Naidu, for that really inspiring journey along South Africa's pathway. Can we move to Malawi now? And just to check that Dr. Yanira Ntumpanyama is online. Let me just make sure you can hear me before I ask my first question.
Yes, I can hear you.
Ah, wonderful. Good. And then I'll come back to Julius after you've answered your questions. So can you tell us, in terms of Malawi, Malawi is one of the few African countries that's integrated biofuels into your energy system using sugarcane ethanol that's produced and blended locally. Can you tell us a little bit about how this was done and what other countries in Africa can learn from you?
Thank you, Professor Hendricks. And in the interest of time, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon all. Malawi is one of the few countries in Africa that integrated biofuels into the energy sector. And the key was the political will, in which government directed that ethanol should be blended with petrol as a vehicle. The government was very much interested, so it was a cabinet directive in the time when we had a fuel crisis that happened in the 1980s or so. So in terms of local production of ethanol, the ethanol is locally produced. The ethanol industry has been anchored into the sugar industry, which has a solid base in the Malawian country and been in existence for a long time. This has ensured steady supply of raw materials for the ethanol production. But I need to
We're not having great success with connectivity today. You back? Sorry, we missed a little bit. Continue.
Okay. So I was just saying that although it has been produced for a number of years, we've had companies producing ethanol for a number of years, but the levels are very low, and maybe we need to do something about it. And ethanol in Malawi is produced as indicated from sugarcane molasses. Ordinary molasses is a waste that has almost almost no use. So molasses, which would have to be disposed of into the environment and maybe cause environmental degradation, is being used for ethanol production, therefore reduces the environmental impact on molasses. So we used existing infrastructures. So the ethanol is distributed in the existing infrastructures for petrol. It is branded at depots and is distributed to customers as one product and not different from other products. So the ethanol is branded and does not require different pipelines. So the advantage is that we used the existing structures that were in place. And then we also had, among others, Malawi standards for use of as a vehicle fuel. We developed a vehicle fuel. So Malawi was one of the first, in actual fact, in the 80s, and especially in 2006, we had developed an ethanol-driven vehicle project. Wow. Yeah, so Malawi had to explore other sources of fuel for vehicles because as I indicated, we had crisis in terms of fuel. So this was actually in response to the National Energy Policy of 2003 that expressed that the government of Malawi will work with the private sector to encourage the expansion of fuel ethanol production capacity to maintain the 2080 blending. That's 20 petrol and ethanol would be 80%. And the Malawi government was also going to support other fuel ethanol applications such as ethanol diesel blends and gel fuel. But I think we really need to do also more on the gel fuel because, Malawi depends a lot on biomass in terms of cooking. So we end up having problems of deforestation and the like. So we learn from other countries like Madagascar, Tanzania, they've done very well. And we're hoping that we can learn something from that. So the promotion of use of ethanol as an alternative fuel in motor vehicles is expected to contribute to energy self-sufficiency, socio-economic development, and environmental protection. The use of locally produced ethanol complements use of petrol, thereby saving foreign exchange and also reducing reliance of petroleum fuel. Ethanol produced from molasses and other biomass feed stock is classified as renewable form of energy, of which its use reduces emissions of greenhouse gases. So we thought that was a very good initiative. And we know that although we don't have a bioeconomy strategy, but we started working on these issues some time back. And we really need to have a transformative strategy that would help us first in terms of complementing the transport and energy sectors on the initiatives that we have already started. But as a way forward, just like other countries have indicated that Madagascar and Tanzania are doing very well, we need a clean, sustainable cooking energy. So I'd like to pause there.
Great, thank you. So apart from the car, are there other bio-initiative examples that you can give us that are innovative from Malawi? And are you using any of the biomass from the maize sector in any of those innovations?
Yes, there are a number of initiatives that are in place. that are using different kind of technologies related to bioeconomy. I want to mention a very unique one because I know some have already mentioned other examples. In addition to energy, another example is an integrated agriculture, aquaculture farming system being promoted by the government. This entails farming of fish, livestock, and crops, including vegetables on a given piece of land. In this development, what we are trying to do is like have an ecosystem-based approach, whereby you integrate all these components of agriculture. But on the other hand, you're also integrating fisheries component, where whatever is being used from livestock, like the dung from livestock, would be used as a feed for the fish. And then you would also use the other components to formulate bioenergy, like whatever waste can be used to formulate biogas. Whatever waste is also used for cooking. On the other hand, the manure can be used for vegetables, so very comprehensive. But what I have learned is that this kind of ecosystem-based approach also help the young to be motivated and create a job for the young people.
Great, great, really important need. So you mentioned the energy for cooking and the jobs, which are really, really important. Thank you so much, Joanna. Can I go back to Julius? Are we able to hear you, Dr. Julius Sekuru?
Yes, Professor.
Hello, hello, do you hear me?
Just a quick reminder for us to try to stay on schedule.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Julius, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So tell us, what's the big importance of the East African bioeconomy strategy?
Okay, first of all, thank you so much, Cheryl, and thank you, Dr. Usman and Professor Joachim, for inviting me to this panel. I have good news for you, Cheryl, that the East African bioeconomy strategy was approved. It was adopted by the East African Community Council of Ministers of Education, Science and Technology, Culture and Sports at their 17th meeting, which took place on the 19th to 23rd of April in Dar es Salaam. So as you have maybe noted, and also as Joachim mentioned earlier, this makes East African Community the first regional economic bloc to have a regional bioeconomy strategy. And we are excited about this and also grateful to the East African community for taking leadership in developing a sustainable bioeconomy as the future growth strategy pathway, not only for the region, but also for the African continent. Maybe you've asked why this regional approach is important. Let me just share only two reasons because of time.
Okay.
So the ultimate benefits of a sustainable bioeconomy with respect to carbon emissions reductions or conservation of biodiversity, clean water, air, and so on, are better realized at a regional level. And you may ask why, but if you look at our resources, biological resources, they're all transboundary. And the effects of climate change or biodiversity loss or water conservation, name it, they are also transboundary in nature. So it's important to have that regional perspective of bioeconomy. Not mentioning the connected cultures and traditions that we share. But more importantly, I think second reason is, we can have individual country wins, let's say by adding value to specific bioresources, like also Dr. Dorothy Okello mentioned in her presentation. But we need cooperation in science and technology at a regional level to leverage each other's scientific expertise and also the capabilities that we have in the countries. But more than that, I think we also need regional markets to exchange, value-added goods and services. And we need economies at scale at the regional level to effectively participate in the global market for the bioeconomy. And maybe participants want to know that the Business Council, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and the Boston Consulting Group Circular Bioeconomy Report 2020 indicates that this global bioeconomy market is growing at about 3.3% per annum, and it will reach about $7.7 trillion by 2030. And this is the opportunity that Africa, absolutely, that Africa should.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thanks for your leadership in this domain. Can I turn, in the interest of time, to Dr. Dominguez Gove to give us maybe just 3 takeaways of what you've heard from listening to the report and the country studies. Dr. Gove is the Director of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources at SADC. Are you online?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
I think, yes, my takeaway, I have learned a lot. I think this area is new and it's really exciting. But I think considering the relevance of this area, if I take, for example, the SADC region, I think all the industrial development that we have planned up to 2063, which is aligned with the African process, it is fully based on natural resources, be it agriculture, be it wildlife, forestry, fisheries, and so forth. So I think this discussion and the good information that has been shared here shows that the bioeconomy has a critical role to play. If I talk for the SADC region, it has a critical role for the regional integration agenda, which is under the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan. And having the 2 countries from our region, namely South Africa, which is one of the leaders, and Namibia, and all the great work that you are doing, I think I would urge these 2 countries to really champion the process within the region so that at least we can increase the pace and adequate use of natural resources for economic development and also for the livelihood of our population. You will recall that the number of food insecure people in SADC region is increasingly every year. Now we are around 52 million, which is 15% of the total population. So we really need innovation and not using the classic methods of exploiting natural resources so that we can meet the demand of increasing population in our region. So it's really something that should not be ending here. It should not be an academic exercise. It is something that we have to quickly bring to the governance, to the policy, and to the people of our region. I will stop here.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Thank you ever so much for the encouragement. And if we can now move to the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, Dr. Esterine Lesenge Fatabong. Esterine, would you like to give your 3 key takeaways from what you've heard? Esterine, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Sherry, and good to see you. It's been a while. And let me, for the interest of time, just recognize everyone present and really thank the presenters for the excellent presentation of the report. We are really pleased with the findings of this report, and we want to congratulate really the panel as well as the forum for the excellent work that they have been doing over the years in picking up very critical issues to the African economy development and reflecting on them so we can learn lessons and see how we move forward. For the interest of time, I won't go a lot on what NEPAD is doing, but just to highlight that this has been a priority in saying how do we use science and technology and innovation as drivers for Africa's development, because we do sincerely believe that innovation is the key driver for change. And over the years, we have invested in several programs on science and technology, some of which you are aware of, like the ASTI program that have done data measurements over the innovation measurements over the years. And we are changing that because of the lessons learned to not only look at measurements, but look at how these data address policy questions. So from the report and from the excellent contributions that we've heard from all the participants and different contributors, we do believe that the issue of bioeconomy is central to our response to COVID-19, to the new realities of how we build a more equitable society. Bioeconomy will have a major role to play, and we believe that we must make the strong linkage between knowledge, utilization, and the society. So it just should not be research for research sake, but ask the question that my sister from South Africa said, those critical questions of what is the value for the investment we are making in biotechnology? What are the downstream applications? And how are they benefiting society? What are the relationship with the private sector? I think when we ask those questions, then we create the policy environment that encourage this organic relationship, between the knowledge and the utilization through the bioproducts that we are developing. And those products must be in response to the needs of society. So from a NEPAD perspective, we think this relationship is critical, and going forward, taking this report forward and building on what the last speaker just said, we must take this to the level of policymakers so that we emphasize the importance of this relationship and the opportunities that a bioeconomy provides to create jobs and address the inequalities that our societies are currently facing. I think the second message is the one on coordination and collaboration. I think it's coming through so well, and the lessons that we've learned from the South African experience, and I think Namibia, they will be able to respond quickly because there were some institutions that were there and mechanisms for coordination were also there. So again, I think we must move out of this business as usual that people want to do their research and publish a nice paper, but take it forward and say, for innovation and transformation, it cannot be a one-person show. It has to be collaborative work between institutions, between individuals, between organizations, between different levels of actors. So creating that platform that will bring close cooperation with all actors within this ecosystem is critical.
Thank you.
And the last point, I know it's a three, just the one is about developing and enhance strategic innovative capacities. We want all these good things, but we must ask the questions, are our universities producing the young people who are going to go into these fields? That's a question I think you will know very well, Shirley, being in the university environment. So we need to build human capacity. We need to build the technological capabilities. And we need to ensure that the private sector is there to be part of this creative environment, not as an add-on, but an integral part of the process, so they can contribute to develop these products and create jobs and create the wealth for everyone. And lastly, the investments are needed. And this investment have to be guided by clear government policies. I just came back from Lund University and visited the university. Has a rich environment ecosystem for innovation. But all these bits are pulled together. The lecturing, the business community that is ready to invest in excellent ideas from young people, the government orientation to say these are the priorities for the economy. So let's see how we drive innovation in these areas. And the regulatory environment to help with the IPs and all of these things. So that ecosystem, we need to harness it and take forward this really interesting report that we have launched today. Thank you.
What a great note to end the discussions. Thank you. Leah, over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheryl Hendricks, for moderating that exciting panel conversation. Thank you to all our panelists. Lessons, opportunities, so much to take away from this conversation. We are drawing nearer to the end of this 10th Malabo Montpellier Forum. And now to deliver the closing remarks for this session, I would like to invite the co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier Forum, Her Excellency Assia Ben Salah Alawi, Ambassador at Large to His Majesty King Mohammed VI of Morocco. Your Excellency.
Microphone. Well, thank you very much, Laye. Your Excellency Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, dear fellow co-chair, Excellencies, Ministers of Environment and Agriculture, distinguished co-chair of the Malabo panel, Professor Von Braun and Dr. Badian, honorable members of the Malabo panel, Malabo Montpellier panel, and partners, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Rabat, Morocco. Thank you for the interventions and talks of today. I would like just to tell you how happy I am to join this 10th Malabo Montpellier Forum for the second time as co-chair, and hope that next time I could welcome you in presence and meet all of you. I have learned a lot from the presentations and from, of course, the highlights about the report. And I am really happy to have this glimmer of hope in our very dim context with its multiple crises. Just a couple of words about this. It has been developed by many interventions. Indeed, while the pandemic and its lasting implications are still among us, we see a surge in China, which looms over the fragile hope for a normal life to be resumed, and the lining up of hundreds of ships outside of Shanghai are not the only disruptive, unfortunately, news in this context. The geopolitical crisis has joined with war in Ukraine with devastating effects, not only for skyrocketing energy prices, but with what we are all concerned about, the food problems. Beyond the shortages and the skyrocketing prices, the fear that a lasting food crisis will be with us. And it's not only for us, this group or experts or leaders, it is in minds all across the world with a very, very deep concern with our population. So I will not go into all the details. I thank very much my co-chair who has detailed the hardships that our populations are living across the continent. So I would like, for my part, to focus a little bit, perhaps not as long as I had expected, on the glass half full, because the session has been much longer than we had probably thought. So first, I would like to thank the panel for a very rich report, and as well, Dr. Joachim von Braun for his initiating the Global Bioeconomy Summit, and who has probably had some inspiration for the very innovative theme of this report. Second, I learned a lot as well from the presentations, not only which have highlighted the findings of the reports, but as well from the countries themselves. And they were very eloquent and very informative. So I'll go straight, to the opportunities, long list, I cannot quote, but very attractive incentives to all the other countries to adapt, to scale up, and to diffuse the advances that are being described. So of course, they are extremely rich from the resilience, new value chains, productivity and jobs, and not any jobs, much better jobs that we badly need in Africa, and so forth. So these are the real incentives that all the countries across Africa need to embark on this new avenue and new adventure of economy, but which is spreading quite hopefully. And why not dream of the 22% that China is scoring in this domain with, of course, trillions of investment in the field. So that to allow bioeconomy to thrive, it must be well designed, and it requires an enabling environment, as it has been very much and very wisely underlined. The centrality, of course, of science and research and innovation, the real driving force to transform not only ourselves, but as well all our societies. Science and technology allow us to do more with our resources. There are so many advances, the science and technology, that are driving forces, a whole new era, and how we understand and interact with our natural surroundings. Artificial intelligence, computing, robotics, nanotechnology, 3D printing, and just name it. All this is conquering, among so many others, to connecting our digital, biological, and physical worlds in a way that has never been done before. So in the process, they are transforming how we grow, manage, and consume our resources. Most of these technologies were existing before the pandemic, but I think that the pandemic has underlined the centrality of some of them, as the virtual talks that we are having today and which has become part of our habits. The last few years have shown light on the need for science and innovation. Without science and technology, we know that the pandemic impact would have been much worse. And we know that in Africa, the inequity about vaccine makes it absolutely urgent that we develop our own advance in all these matters. So the central, crucial need for more investment in education and R&D are really obvious. We will need all this to address the other challenges we face in our own way. The climate crisis, for example, which is so acute here in Africa. We have to develop our own solutions and approaches. Bioeconomics allow us to leverage our own natural wealth and human capacity to build durable, sustainable solutions. This is not to say that we are starting from scratch. We have had testimonies and informative presentations which tell us a lot about what is happening across the continent. But we really do need to invest much more than what we are doing. What makes me most hopeful is that from discussion we have had today, is that we here on the African continent are creating our own homegrown solutions, Our young people are using science and technology to harness their wonderful creativity and innovative nature. But still, we still need to invest much more. Although my own country is almost reaching the 1% of the GDP to be spent on R&D, as the African Union Agenda 26.3 recommends, we all have to do more. In Morocco, many various initiatives seek to develop bioeconomy, but they remain mainly oriented towards animal and human food production, about cosmetics, about some energy, and so forth. I don't want to go through the long list. The argan, of course, ecosystem is well known across the world now, which provides comfort and income for thousands of women in the continent and nourishes people, but as well cosmetics across the world now. Olive trees, marine algae, research, palm trees, and olive trees, and so forth. And myself, I am engaged in a new foundation that we just have created, which is the African Green Women-Oriented Foundation, in order to lift out of poverty and isolation very poor territories and which are specially targeted by climate change. And we are trying to harness innovation, research, putting together all the stakeholders with the ground actors, from university researchers to NGOs engaged in the field, to the farmers with their ancestral knowledge. And we are trying to create some magic alchemy to make sure we can help these territories which are very badly hit by the climate change. And as you know, drought is particularly severe this year. And we do see that it's not a luxury, that it is a must. So what I would like to say to finish on this long list of requirements is that governance is at the very heart of our problems in Africa. And we do know that, because it has to help and orchestrate all the other activities in order to make sure that things happen. In Morocco, we are blessed to have a strong leadership to provide the right guidance and oversight. His Majesty Mohammed V's vision and ambition, not only for Morocco, but for Africa at large, is very well known by Africans. So a broad plan, as you know, for agriculture has been designed in 2020 for 10 years, green generation, which builds on the Plan Vert that most of Africans know by now, but trying to bundle up to harness more innovation, new ways of doing things, and to give more modernity to the sector. Perhaps is there a room for a specific strategy for bioeconomy to create the ecosystem which would be appropriate to carry on the transition towards bioeconomy, to make sure that we cannot rely only on the carbon-based economy, which is so destructive for our planet. So, to conclude, let me just stress the essential with a key message. It's the human factor, which is to play a main role in the transformation we are all looking for. In this very dim context again, I think we are blessed in Africa to have a population with a majority of young people who are eager to create and participate. Today, we have a new phenomenon. The planet has become a political object. So we do have to build on this very strong common and large common ground that it is providing itself as a playground in order to build up a new humanism where education for peace has all its place and to allow us to continue to live and thrive on this planet. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Asia Ben Salah Alawi, for that call to action. And this brings us to the end of the 10th meeting of the Malabo Montpellier Forum. So what did you think? How did you find the session? Drop a comment in the chat to let us know what you think about this session. Please monitor our chat. We have shared resources. Visit www.mamo.org to visit our website and get the bioeconomy report and all other reports produced by the Malabo Montpellier panel. I will now invite, as we round up, all our panelists, if you will, please turn on your video so we can see you and get a beautiful shot for our documentation on this event. Please stay tuned for our post-event brief. We'll be sharing a brief with the key takeaways. Thank you so much for joining us, and please subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, until we see you for our next event. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It's great having you. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Ambassador, Prime Minister, everybody, Aikari, Minister Lowe. So thank you, all of you. See you next time around.
Bye-bye.